Good day, everybody. Happy Tuesday. My name is Ben Gabriel, and with me is our Director of Technology here, Angel Sabino. Angel, how's it going?
Great, great, great. It's a good day.
Good day. All right, so this is our Tech Talk, everybody. We do Tech Talks once every 2 months. Today's topic is security. The title of the session is Think Before You Click, Building Everyday Security Awareness. So that is what predominantly Angel is going to be taking us through over the next 1 hour. I'm going to handle some of the introductory stuff, of course, as well. So Angel, let's move on and just talk CP for a second, please, sir. All right, so most of you are going to know the drill, but if you need CP, the session qualifies for an hour. We will do 4 polls/quizzes. There are going to be some of these that have right answers to them, so you want to be paying close attention. I'm dropping a PDF of the slide presentation into the chat panel right now, and I'll do it another time or two because if you join after I originally share it in the chat, you don't see it. So I just dropped it again. There is a PDF of the slides. Please ask questions through the chat panel. You can also use the Q&A panel too. Angel and I will do our best to answer questions. We may hold the questions till we get to one of these short polling breaks. And then when you close out, there is a survey. So please answer at least 3 of the polls/quizzes if you like CPE. So Angel, that's my CPE intro. Let's go to the next slide and I'll briefly hit the learning objective. So a couple main things today, everybody. We'll identify some common security threats and then list some steps to protect yourself and your organization from those security threats. So those are the 2 main learning objectives we're going to cover for today. And then Angel, I've got one last slide. Do you want to take us through the agenda?
Yeah, the agenda today, we're going to be doing an introduction and why security awareness matters. After that, we'll follow up with common threats and how they work. We'll follow that up with real world examples and some case studies. Try to get through that one quickly, even though it's very interesting. Then we'll go on to best practices for staying safe. Basically, just running through a few different areas where we can highlight a few things that we can take from this. And then we'll just go through some key takeaways.
All right, sounds like a plan. So, all right, let's go. Let's
With
go
that,
to
I
our
think we
first
have
poll.
our first polling question, right?
Yeah, our first polling question. So, first polling question, everybody. Remember, there's going to be 4 of these, so please answer them. And I am very interested to see what the answers are here. So, if your password were a superhero, who would it be? I Angel and I talked about this. I already told him who I thought I would like to be. So your options are Wonder Woman, and there's some additional descriptors in there. Wonder Woman, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Spider-Man.
Now, again, there's no wrong answer for this one, but there definitely is a wrong answer because I'm biased. So I'm just gonna throw that out there.
All right. Looks like 80% of folks have voted so far. Oh, we're jumping up pretty fast. 93%. I'm going to leave the poll up. If you're not really sure who to pick somebody. I'll leave the poll up for 5 more seconds. And okay, I'm going to close the poll down. And so here's the winner. Wonder Woman out in front. Angel, any comments?
Well, I do appreciate that Wonder Woman did come out in front, but the right answer is definitely Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is the best, plain and simple.
I was going for Black Panther myself. I thought advanced, powerful, and protected by tech sounded good. Okay, Angel, I'm going to close down that first poll and let's get right into things. So the floor is yours.
All right, so we're going to start off with an introduction to security awareness and why that matters. So one of the biggest things here is pointing out that the human factor in security awareness has to be thing number one. There's a note here, 95% of breaches involve a human error. Reason for that is we're easily susceptible. We're humans, we're scared of things, we're easily distracted, we lose track of who we're talking to or why we're talking to them, we don't pay attention to a link. These are the kind of things that happen on a day-to-day basis. So it's like it's always really important to realize how big of an impact you make as an individual on the security of the places that you work at. With that being said, it means we're also the first line of defense. We're the strongest point of security control when it comes to things that can be put in place. We can put in tools, we can put in policies, we can put in all these walls basically to say, hey, you can't do this or you can do this. But at the end of the day, if you're on the phone and you hand over that password, none of that stuff means anything. Um, to go further than that, there's growing threats. Every day there's something new. There's a new tactic. There's a new text message, scam that's going around. The one I've been getting recently is for some reason every DMV from here to California thinks that I owe them tolls. And you'd be surprised how often people fall for stuff like that. And especially since, like, sitting in front of me, I actually have a bill from a DMV in Dallas, and I'm also getting text messages at the same time from ones in California. They don't correlate with each other, but these are the ways that people fall into these traps. And then, there's the personal impact that we make by falling for these things. It's up to us to help protect our company stuff. It's up to us to help protect our own data. And it all kind of intertwines with each other by getting something like your work email compromised. That can lead into some of your personal sides of things. So it's seeing how all that stuff is tied together and how we as a whole, the human factor, really play a big part in making sure that we keep this stuff secure.
I've been getting lots of text messages. Like I just got one from Circle K today.
Hmm.
And
The gas station?
I don't know. I just
Yeah, it's
deleted
it's
it.
it's like a convenience store kind of thing.
Yeah, why did, but I mean, how did I get that, right? So just that's what I just saw this morning.
Circle K. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
All right, so from there we'll go to common threats and how they work. So basically what this is going to be, it's just a rundown of some of the key cybersecurity things that we need to be aware of. One of the main ones is phishing attacks. These are going to be fake emails that are designed to steal credentials. It'll be things like, hey, here's a new coupon from Home Depot. You just got $50. Just click here and sign in with your credentials and we'll give you your coupon. Very common, happens to us on a daily basis, both on the personal side and on the work side. And on the work side, they use social engineering, which is the next one, to kind of manipulate you into feeling comfortable sending that info. Let's say your company uses ADP, and you're like, hey, I use ADP every day. I'm used to it. I'm comfortable with it. Someone on social media had mentioned it, or maybe it's on your company website that you use ADP. Well, now the malicious person knows that, and they use that information to design a phishing attack that's directly geared towards your company by using ADP as the phishing email. So that's a little bit of social engineering, but also it gets deeper than that. They might go on to Facebook or LinkedIn and find out who your colleagues are and create a fake email address or a fake account that if a Michael, they might change us a C and an H or a C and a K, and then suddenly you think you're talking to Michael from work, but it's not really Michael from work, and you might divulge some personal information or business information that you shouldn't be. To move on from there, from the phishing attacks and the social engineering, they also use malware and ransomware. So these are the more common things from years and years ago: viruses, ransomware attacks where they like lock down machines and stuff like that. Um, this is normally a after effect. So let's say you fall for the phishing attempt. Sometimes it's not just about credential stealing. It could be click this link to get your coupon. You click the link and then it installs, let's say, a ransomware on your machine. Now that that ransomware is on your machine, it has the ability to spread out. Once it spreads out, it might do something like lock the screen and say, hey, you got to pay this $1 million, ransom in order to get your data back. And those things can spread throughout the business as well. So that's, it's not as common these days. These days, it's a lot more about data and getting people to divulge credentials, but it definitely still happens, and it's still just as common. It's just with things, escalating, it's become lower on the totem pole. And the last one would be business email compromise. That goes back to phishing attacks and social engineering. Once all those things happen, once you've fallen victim to that stuff, they might actually gain access to your business email. When stuff like that happens, then they can actually start spreading that out further. They'll forward all your emails to to one of their own accounts. That way they can kind of snoop on what's happening and get more information. So to kind of further the social engineering aspect of it, they'll be able to say, hey, we know that as a threat actor, they'll know like, hey, we know that Ben is sending out invoices to company number one. So I can talk to Jimmy, who's in accounting, and say, hey, Jimmy, my name is Ben, but it's spelled wrong. And I need this invoice paid real quick to this company because all this stuff makes sense. It's stuff that's happening in the company. So business email compromise can be one of the worst ones that happens because of how widespread it can get. And they're also a little bit harder to track down too at the end of the day.
So phishing attacks, social engineering, malware and ransomware, and then business email compromise.
And then how they're all connected to each other. That's also the weird part. It's sometimes it's individual things, but a lot of times it's we're using a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and combined is when you really, you increase the severity of things.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, looks like we're on to poll number two.
All right, so poll number 2 is a quiz type poll. So let's go back and that. All right, so I'm going to launch this one. So if you're paying close attention, things were there. But which of the following is the most common cause of security breaches? And we do believe we have a correct answer in here, right? Right, Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll give everybody, I don't see any questions yet that have come through the Q&A or the chat panel. I have dropped a PDF of the slide presentation into the Zoom chat window. So if you joined within the last few minutes or whatever, you'll see it in there. If you joined at the very beginning, you may see a few different copies in there. But they're all the same. They're just to catch folks that may have joined a little bit after the fact. So looks like we got about 85% of people have answered, Angel. So I'm going to leave the poll up for another 10 seconds. Which of the following is the most common cause of security breaches? Outdated software, weak passwords, human error, or malware? Okay, let's close the poll up and share the results. So what do you think, Angel?
I don't see the results. So
No,
do you see the results? Can
I
you tell me
do
what,
see
what
the
the winner was?
results. Yeah. Yeah. Let's say, let me, can you see him now?
No, no, I see nothing.
Well, here are the results then. It says, let's see, let's try one more thing. How about now?
Nope.
No? All right. Well, you got to take my word for it. Thanks everybody for voting. So the correct answer was human error. And so we had the great majority of folks that answer human error. Had a few folks choose weak passwords as well. So human error, weak passwords were where everybody landed here on the most common
Okay.
calls.
And honestly, that makes sense. So although weak passwords can be one of the biggest areas that happens, it at the end of the day, it's caused by human error. And that's kind of that way where you can start to see that no matter which way you look at it, the root of a lot of this, it does come back to the human error factor. Like it said on one of the previous slides, which Ben told everybody how to cheat. Oh, now I see the answers.
There's a
Um,
check mark here. Go ahead, Angel.
since Ben told everybody how to cheat, it was that 95% of attacks, they start with the human error factor. So congratulations to everyone that chose human error. You know that you're the problem now.
All right, Angel, back to you.
All right, so we'll go through some real world examples. I'm not going to get stuck on these too much because I can talk about them forever. Some of them are with really big companies that we all know of, some of them not so much. But again, just to run through it real quick, there were, these are just four from the last 10, 20 years or something like that. There was a Target breach in 2013 that was caused by an HVAC vendor that fell for a phishing scam. And then that escalated to, God knows how many other steps before, the root of what happened was exposed. There was one for Equifax in 2017 that was caused by unpatched software. And even that kind of goes back to human error because there was a choice made somewhere up the chain not to upgrade some of their back end stuff. Colonial Pipeline in 2021, there was a ransomware attack, so all their machines got locked down, and that started with an employee. I think it was like an employee that had software in the machine that they shouldn't have. And then LastPass in 2022, that one was from a employee that had third-party software on their laptop that wasn't approved by the company, and then bad actors were able to get in through that. And then again, that just escalated from there. So again, I could talk about this forever. I was told not to get stuck, so I won't. But it's just really interesting information because there's a lot of financial, pain that happens from stuff like this, but also reputational pain that happens to these companies. People stop using LastPass as much as they used to. It used to be one of the major password managers. I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, something like that. But since this breach in 2022, their usage has dropped phenomenally. So just examples. So from there, we will move on to best practices for staying safe. This is 4 parts. We're going to start with passwords. I'm going to try not to read best practices for staying safe for each one. I'll just try to tell you what this one's about. So anyways, this one's passwords. Some of the things that you can do when it comes to passwords is making sure that you're always choosing a unique password. What that means is we have 7 million different apps that we use, depending on your industry and business and stuff like that. But I know in particular in our industries, we tend to have 30 plus different apps that we're logging into on a regular basis. It can be annoying, but ideally speaking, we should be using a different password for each one of those accounts. This stops things like, you know, password from software number one getting compromised. And then because of that, now they have access to the 600 other apps that you have access to because you were using the same password for each one. So again, it's always best practice to try to use a different one or implement something like SSO, which is a whole other spiel that I could talk about for 20 minutes. Using a password manager. This can be used to both generate and store complex passwords. So one of the best, practices for creating a password is to like use something like a phrase like horses ran up the creek or some random thing. Um, a password manager allows you to just set something like, I want 26 character passwords with special characters, uppercase, lowercase, all this stuff. You hit a button and it generates something that you're never going to remember. But this is stored in your password manager. And whenever you go to QBO's website, you'll be able to just open the password manager, copy paste your password in there. You never have to remember it. Ideally speaking, you only remember the one password to get into your password manager. This makes it exponentially harder for people to crack those because obviously it's just some 26 character long random thing that no one's ever going to remember. Another part, multi-factor authentication. I know everybody's been talking about that lately. I know it's not the funnest thing in the world, but having MFA, which would be stuff like sending a text message to your phone, which nowadays isn't the best option because there's another form of attack called smishing, which is they basically get a hold of your text messages and blah blah blah. Anyways, but something like any form of multi-factor authentication is going to be helpful, whether that's SMS or um, something like your biometrics, which would be like fingerprints or Face ID or anything like that, or something like the Microsoft Authenticator app. Or Duo for anybody that uses something like that. Something where it'll basically prompt you, hey, somebody's trying to log into your account, put in this code, or do you approve it, press this button. That stops a lot of the breaches that happen. Even if they get your password, without that MFA prompt, they will not be able to get in. So they have to basically compromise 2 different systems or 3 different systems in order to actually get into your stuff. And then regularly updating stuff. That doesn't mean going back and changing your passwords every couple of days, but it does mean like if you find out, oh, this password that I've been using for years, it came up on the dark web, it's been breached. I know it's been breached. For instance, I know my Google password manager, it will randomly tell me, hey, this password has been seen in 10 breaches or something like that. And that lets me know, oh, I can no longer use that password. And now I have to go back and find out where did I use that password? Which website was it on so that I can get that changed. It's not something that I think people do often. It's a little annoying, to be perfectly honest. And I know like we have 20 years worth of passwords that we've been using, so it's like it hurts sometimes to want to change it. Um, but when it's your data or your company's data or anything like that, that's, at the end of the road, it is really important to make sure that we're keeping that stuff updated.
Angel, I've got a question for you.
Got
Um,
answers.
so, I mean, much like my phone has been doing this for a while, I have an iPhone, but with my computer, I have a laptop. When I open it up, the camera's coming on and it's looking at my face before I can log in. And I think that's even extending itself into some applications that I use. Um, where does that fall in here? What do you classify that as?
So that would actually be part of multi-factor authentication. In particular, that would be considered biometric multi-factor authentication. So that is because there's like something which would be a password, then it's something you have, which would be your face or your phone or your thumb. Those are like the key points in when you're trying to set up a secure password situation.
Got it. Okay. Anything else you can think of? Unique password, password manager, MFA, or regular updates wise in terms of passwords?
Do not write them and put them on the bottom of your keyboard.
Yeah.
I spent, I don't know, years and years and years doing IT support, and I couldn't tell you how many offices I walked into where there's, a sticky note on a monitor or a sticky note underneath the keyboard that clearly says password and then whatever the password is right underneath it. It still happens to this day. And I know it's a joke on plenty of websites or shows and stuff like that, but we're humans and this is the things that we do.
All right. So best practices for staying safe. So we hit passwords. What's next?
What's next? Next is spotting suspicious communications. And it's taking me a lot not to read best practices for staying safe. I said it anyways. All right, so for this one, lots of words on the screen. Apologize for that. But really wanted to target this one so that, there's something good to take away from this because this happens a lot to people. So first thing would be email red flags. Some things to look out for when you get those emails, and this would be phishing attacks or even social engineering attacks. They kind of, again, they link into both. Urgent language and threats. So this would be things like you get an email and it says, read now or update from your boss or, basically things that would, elicit certain kind of feelings from you. And the purpose of that is to immediately kind of knock you off your normal process and be like, oh, this is important. I really have to pay attention to this. Or, oh, this is important. I have to action this right away. Um, and then the counter to that would be generic greeting. So, the email comes in, there's nothing, really that stands out about it. And it doesn't feel like it's coming from, let's say, ADP or from your bank or from, your internal organization. If it feels like it's from a template that somebody's just sending out to 10,000 people at the same time to try to see who they get, then 99% chance it's some kind of spam or phishing. Suspicious sender addresses. Um, that one is one of the ones that it gets a little harder to look at or harder to catch. They try to mask where it's coming from. So it'll say things like Microsoft, like let's say it's info@microsoft.com. That's where the email sender is from. But Microsoft is spelt with an extra I. Or instead of an O, they use a zero. Instead of an S, maybe they use a dollar sign. So these little small changes where unless if you're just glancing at it real quick, you might not notice that it says, Microsoft instead of Microsoft. Um, but it's one of that one happens all the time. That one's, there's a name for that too. Like I forget what the name of like the spoofed domains are, but people go out and they buy all these domains and they purposely try to make them look like your company or look like another company. Um, to go back to your company, you can, there might be, you might get an email that, if your company's name is, I don't know, controller.com. They'll add an extra, somebody will go out, they'll buy a domain, they'll add an extra L to it, or they'll add an extra E, or they'll take out a letter. It'll look just like your business. It'll say, Jimmy at controller.com if you look at it real quick. But the more you pay attention is when you realize, oh, that's not an O, it's a zero. So it's really hard to find those, but it's really important to try to point it out. And the picture on the bottom left, the Home Depot one, that's an example of being able to look at an email. It says it's from Lisa Hanley, but if you actually look at where it's coming from, you see that it's coming from info at blah, 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 myfamilyfinancialguide.com. Somebody's email probably got hacked and now they're sending out spam to people, but that's where you would be looking at to find out, like, is this legitimate? Another thing would be unexpected attachments. So if Ben's email got hacked and he doesn't know about it, and now he's sending out, sorry, Ben, I keep throwing you under the bus. And he's sending out random attachments to everyone inside the company. And it's like, click here or download this report real quick and then send it back to me. Any of those kinds of things. If you weren't expecting for Ben to send you, a TPS report for the week, then, ideally speaking, it's not real. And you should probably pick up the phone, call Ben and say, hey, I didn't know you needed this report. I've never heard of this report before. Did you send this email? And that kind of kicks off that chain of like, oh, something's not right. Link safety, that would be the next one. So in those emails, let's say the sender looks good. Let's say it's none of this stuff, none of the other key factors are popping out at you, but there's a link on there. It says, hey, click on this link to go to your bank, or click on this link to open up a page to log in. They can easily hide malicious websites in those links and still make it look like you're going to a legitimate place. So the picture on the bottom right shows you the link itself says yourbank.com, but when you hover over that link in your whatever your email client is, it'll pop up either on the top or on the bottom and it'll show you where that link is actually going to take you. So in this example, it says yourbank.com, but the link actually takes you to thisisnotyourrealbank.com. And that's a very common way for them to spoof people into thinking, oh, this looks legitimate. The email came from a real place, and that I know that website, so I'm just going to click on it and do the thing real quick. Happens all the time. A good way to find that out is to check for typos in URLs as well. It's the same thing with the email addresses. If the link itself says yourbank.com and then you hover over it and it still says yourbank.com, you still want to look for things like, is that an O or is that a zero? Did they add an extra N? Small changes like that still trip people up. Could also verify with the sender directly. Obviously takes a little bit more time, but if you're being cautious and you want to make sure, hey, this is legitimate, you know, Ben, I'm real sorry, man. Ben, hey, did you send me this link? Is this something I need to be going to? You normally don't send me links like that. And then, some common things is like using bookmarks for this one says for banking, but it could be for anything. If you're used to going to certain websites or certain banks and you get an email that says, hey, log into your bank real quick because you need to verify your identity, it's always a good idea to go to your own link. Go to your own bookmarks, open up your bank, log in that way, see if there's any information, because normally it'll tell you when you log in, hey, you need to verify, and then okay, the email was legitimate, but I didn't use the email to navigate there and allow myself to be tricked into doing something that I shouldn't. Um, Moving on from that, you have phone scams. Phone scams aren't as common as some of the other ones, mainly because someone has to physically be doing the thing. Um, and a lot of us ignore our phones, sadly, unless it's a text message or something like that. It's kind of like when somebody rings your doorbell these days, everyone's like, well, who's at my door? Why is somebody at my door? I feel like it's the same when the phone rings. It's like, why is my phone ringing? But let's say you do pick up that phone call, um, verify the caller identity. I know for me, for instance, I get a lot of these calls and the number is either really long or doesn't look right, or the caller ID is from, God knows where. So verifying who you're talking to and why they're calling you, that's always a key factor. A lot of times they'll trip up if they say, "Oh, I'm from Microsoft and I'm calling because we need to verify your licensing." You can ask them, very simple questions to kind of verify, like, are they from Microsoft? Like, oh, what's the Microsoft support number? If they can't answer simple questions like that, then like this is a scam and I don't need to be talking to them. 99.99999, 100% of the time, nobody should be asking you for a password over the phone. If you ever get a call and it's like, oh, we need this password to get into your bank because of whatever reason, or we need this password to get into your computer for whatever reason, anything that has to do with a password, there is zero reason why we should ever be giving out a password over the phone. There are secure methods to share passwords, encrypted emails, encrypted services, and stuff like that. If you ever work with an entity, whether that's like, let's say you call uh, one of your line of business softwares for support, um, and they're trying to help you with something, and they're like, "Oh, can we get your password to log in?" Um, they should have a method in place to actually securely for you to securely send that kind of information over, or they have alternate means of logging into either your account or your instance without physically needing your password. A lot of that stuff goes back to bigger security, like posture kind of stuff. Like, there should be logging for everything that happens in our world in particular. So if the support person is logging in as me and they check off the wrong box or they delete something that they shouldn't have, whatever the case may be, now it looks like I did it. And I would have to prove that this other person did it. And that starts a whole chain of, a chain of like, I forgot what the word is. But anyways, it starts a whole process that's not fun for anybody. So you should never give out your password over the phone. A good thing to try is always to hang up and call back. Going back to the Microsoft thing, if somebody from Microsoft is calling you saying, "Hey, we found this thing, we need to help you with it," or whatever, you could always hang up, call right back, and be like, call that support number from Microsoft back and say, "Hey, I just got a call," even though it's going to take you 600 minutes to get to somebody from Microsoft. But anyways, I just got a call. Somebody said my account was needed updating. I'm trying to find out what the validity of that is. They would have records if that actually happened, and that's a good way for you to find out it was just a scam. And at the end of the day, trusting your instincts. Whether it's emails, links, phone, text messaging. That's another one that does happen often. I was just complaining about it. I think one of the biggest things, because it's a human factor, is trusting our instincts. It's like this doesn't feel right. Something about this is fishy. This isn't the way that Ben normally talks. Any of these things that you're instinctually seeing and going, I just don't like the way this feels. Stop, take a breather, and look at it from a different angle. Reach out to the person that's trying to contact you. Hover over the link. Check the sender for the email. That's going to be one of the best things you can do in those instances.
So Angel, we hit like, the first two, email red flags and link safety. To me, those feel most like email related things. Although we both started talking about text message stuff, that's what I seem to be seeing. What I feel is a lot of, I'll just call it spam. I don't know if it's malicious, but it's spam. So we have email. So we got the email red flags, links and emails. Then we talked about phone, and then we also have the text element too, which I feel like, is that a growing element? Is that just mainly spam? This is kind of me asking. Is that mainly spam, or is that a growing element of potential bad actors too?
No, it definitely is a growing element. So it wasn't as widely looked at for a long time. But actually, here recently, there's been a lot of legislation that was put in to put a lot of barriers in place when it comes to text phishing, or I think it's called smishing actually, which is a weird word, um, to try to combat some of this because it did get so prolific for a while. So because of the regulations that were put in place, it's a lot less, but it still happens on a regular basis. So if you might get 100 junk emails, you're probably going to get five junk text messages in that same kind of variable or like ratio. And they're just as bad. And it's the same things. It's links, or it's, hey, send me some info, or it's, your bank account got compromised. You need to send us your password real quick so that we can unlock it. It's definitely become more of an issue. And even with the legislations in place, what they're doing nowadays is they're kind of burning through numbers, is the best way to put it. So they'll get a number, they'll do all the legal things to make it legitimate so that they can send out these campaigns, is what they're called. And then they'll burn it. So they'll send out millions of text messages. They'll get as much information as they can with it, and then finally it'll get flagged, and then that number can no longer be used anymore. But in the process, they've ran their campaign. They got what they could get out of it. So definitely another piece to look out for. And thanks for bringing it up, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. If anyone's had any, I'll just say phone scam experience at your firm or at your office, and you want to chat in what that was like or how you might have identified something, um, I would definitely like to know there. So, Angel, anything? I think it's a really good slide, really practical things to be paying attention to: email, links, phone, text. Anything else here before we move on?
On this one, Um, oh, I mean, an added factor to some of these would be the addition of AI stuff. That stuff is very, very new, and it's also expensive, so that's why you don't see it as much. But when it comes to phone and even some email, there's usage of AI, whether that's video or voice, actually. So like somebody could get a recording of my voice, let's say, and then they can use an AI tool to sound just like me, call somebody and be like, yeah, it's totally me. Like, that I need your password because I'm your IT guy and, I'm going to help you with this. But that goes back to trusting your instincts. Like, would Angel call me and ask for my password? The answer to that is no. But you have to really fall back on that human factor. And does this feel right? Is this normal? Would Angel normally call me for that stuff? So definitely another thing to be keeping an eye out.
So, in a situation like that, just to ask the dumb question, I would assume that you're not calling me and my caller ID is not coming up and saying Angel Sabino, or, it's coming up something else. So, what I should be doing there is hanging up and then calling you directly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Verifying that caller ID, hanging up and calling back directly, and trusting your instincts.
Okay. Okay. All right, great, Angel. So let's move on, and I think we have our next quiz, and I think I figured out how to put the answer up. You have to do an extra checkbox, which just what I need is an extra checkbox. But okay, so this is number three, everybody, and this is another one. This is another quiz one with a correct answer. What's a red flag that an email might be a phishing attempt? Personalized greeting, urgent language and threats, sent from your boss, or contains a company logo? What's a red flag that an email might be a phishing attempt? Personalized greeting, urgent language and threats, sent from your boss, or contains a company logo? And I'll leave the poll up. Most folks have voted, but I'll leave it up for another 20 seconds or so, everybody.
So on the last one, Ben, by the way,
Yeah.
if my AI counterpart calls you and tells you that I need to get your password, you can just ask how if I'm having a good hair day.
See, I'll ask you, yeah, what product are you using again?
Exactly.
All right, I'm gonna close the poll down in 5 seconds, everybody. So if you haven't voted, dive across your desk and pick your answer. All right, I'm gonna end the poll now, and I am gonna share the results. And Angel, can you see the results this time?
I do.
Beautiful. Okay, so you wanna take us through the results?
Do you actually see what other people voted for though?
We can see the totals. Okay,
Okay,
what
I
can
don't see that. So you got to
okay.
share that with me.
I love the quizzes. I wish they'd make it a little easier. So the correct answer we had was urgent language and threats, and the majority of folks answered there. We did have some
Awesome.
personalized greetings sent from your boss and company logo. Each got a vote, but most folks did pick urgent language and threats.
Okay, yeah. So again, just making sure that when we get these emails that we're looking for that urgent language, that the threats involved in there, you need to do this right now. Those like quick action items when you get something like that, that would be the key thing to look out for.
All right. Okay, Angel. back to you. We have just one more quiz slash poll, everybody. So go ahead, Angel.
All right, so the next one would be safe browsing habits. Um, a lot of this goes back to the slide that we were just looking at, but this one's more targeted at when we're actually on the internet and what we're doing on the internet, and how we're navigating things when we're doing that. So first one would be keeping software updated. Those are going to be things like Windows patches. Every time Chrome bugs you and tells you that it needs an update, or Edge bugs you and says it needs an update, or whatever browser you might be using at the time. A lot of the ways that people get into machines, or a lot of the ways that those links that lead to malicious things work, is because they're using breaks in the code or some kind of vulnerability that hasn't been patched yet because you don't have your software updated, in order to circumvent security features, or you know, um, to swipe up, a password that you might have typed in. That's how that stuff happens, and that's why there's always updates. Like, I know the updates are annoying. I know it takes time. I hate restarting my computer personally because I always have 6 million things open, and I'm always afraid I'm going to forget to close something and save it. But if we don't go through that process and keep our things updated, it's like leaving the door cracked open. It's still closed. Somebody really has to walk up to it to realize, oh, this door's not open. This door's not completely locked, or it's not closed. Um, it's the same concept. By not doing those patches, we're leaving just that little bit of space there, so that if somebody gets close enough, they'll realize, oh, there's a hole here that I can get in. Um, you can help yourself by doing things like keeping automatic updates turned on. But again, if you're not allowing the machine to, let's say, restart, or for the app to restart, in order to apply those, then they're there, but they're not activated yet. Using secure websites, most websites will have, if you look at the URL, it'll say HTTPS in it. Um, 99.9% of websites are secured these days. So always looking for that little padlock on the top left, or the HTTPS in the URL. That's always very helpful. Downloading from trusted sources. Sometimes we're looking for, I don't know, got to download Zoom Workplace, let's say. Going to Zoom's website and downloading it directly from Zoom is always your best answer. I know it's very easy to, like, go to Google, let's say, and just type in Zoom download and click on the first thing that comes up. Um, but you don't know where that's coming from, especially if it leads to some fishy looking website. And a lot of times they'll still get you the app, but they'll bundle it with something else. They'll bundle it with like spyware or something like that, something that they can put on your computer to kind of sell you something or infect your machine. So always go to the main source for any of these apps that you're trying to download. Enabling pop-up blockers can help. They can cause issues with some websites, just to be completely transparent about it. So it's like they're not always super helpful, but it does help if you end up at a malicious site and the pop-up is what would initiate the installation of malware, or the pop-up is what's going to try to sell you something, anything like that. So enabling pop-up blockers does help. Most browsers nowadays have that implemented by default, because a lot of places try not to use pop-ups in general, at least not the way pop-ups were in like the early 2000s. A lot of websites will have like embedded pop-ups. So it's like you go to a website, and maybe after a few seconds, it'll slowly come up with like a chat box, or like hey, do you want to sign up for our newsletter? Those are normally okay. It's the pop-ups that are malicious are the ones that are coming up in a new window or anything like that. That's normally where the red flags can be coming from. And also logging out of things completely. When we walk away from our machines, or just in general, we have a tendency to just stay logged into things. It's always a good idea to log out of these things when we're not using them, um, just for security purposes. It's an extra step, but it does help.
Keep software updated using secure websites, download from trusted sources, pop-up blockers, and logging out completely. Okay. Any final thoughts here on safe browsing habits?
Uh, the two main ones here are keeping software updated and downloading from trusted sources. Like, the other ones are helpful, but those two in particular, like, those are big ticket items.
Got it. Okay. What's next, Angel?
Last but not least, we have device security. So we all have mobile devices nowadays, whether that's iPads, tablets, our phones, our smartwatches. We're surrounded by devices. our laptops, our computers, obviously those are also part of it. Um, so we also want to be making sure that we're doing everything we can to secure our devices because people can get in either, from the same kinds of things, malicious text messages, email links that go to bad places, but also with physical things as well. So things like having a screen lock on your phone. Um, Another thing that I know is annoying, but it is a security best practice. If you're not on your phone for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I think 5 minutes is kind of the stretch of that. Your screen should be automatically locking, and it should require some kind of PIN or biometric authentication, so like your face or your finger or something like that, in order to get back into it. Um, Anybody can think of how many times they've been at Starbucks and they get up to go get their coffee real quick and they just left the phone on the table because they know it's within eyeshot, but it takes 10 seconds for someone to grab your phone, go to the bathroom, and pull data from it or whatever the case may be. And if you didn't have a screen lock setting on there, then you're going to be stuck in a bad situation. Um, the auto lock timing, so like I just talked about it 2 seconds ago, but it's the timing of that is also very important. So if we go back to that Starbucks, situation, if you have a 5 minute delay on your phone, which like again, it's kind of the cusp of how long it should be from a security standpoint, you'd have to be away from your phone for a full 5 minutes before the screen actually locks. So if you're just walking up for a minute or two and somebody gets your phone in that short frame or time frame, or your computer even, as long as they keep moving the mouse or pressing a button, the screen's not going to lock. So keeping those numbers low, like balancing usability with security, kind of finding that balance between this is annoying, but I know I need it. um, Having remote wipe capabilities. So, for instance, for Apple phones, having things turned on like Find My Device. That way, if you lose it or somebody steals it, the screen should be locked so they can't get into it. And then also now you have the ability to actually action that and say, my device was stolen. I want to lock it. I want to permanently wipe it. I want to, make it, unusable. That way, no matter what, even if somebody somehow found a way to do something, you had that ability to wipe it, and so that way somebody couldn't get into your stuff. App permissions, that one is a little bit harder to work through. But I know every time you download a new app from your phone, whatever it might be, it'll ask you, "Hey, we want to access this," or "Hey, we want to access that," or "Hey, is it okay to sync up with your contacts and stuff like that?" These things are very helpful, and we should be using technology in these ways to basically better our lives and make things more efficient and automate certain processes. But you also want to be mindful of how much permission you're giving to certain apps, especially if you're not comfortable with the app. If it's something like Zoom and it's saying, I want access to your contacts, that makes sense in the context of Zoom because I'm using it to contact people. So having those things talk to each other makes sense. But if I downloaded random, texting app number four that I've never really heard of before, and it's asking me for access to the hard drive on my phone, that one I might not be too comfortable with because why does this thing need access to the hard drive on my phone? So just being mindful of that. There's no perfect answer for it. It's just an awareness. It's an instinct thing. And then being cautious when you're on public Wi-Fi. This doesn't happen that often, especially nowadays. But if you're at Starbucks and you join onto their public Wi-Fi, technically you're sharing that space with everyone else in Starbucks. And there are methods where somebody can intercept your traffic. So like if you're going to your bank, they can actually see the fact that you're going to the bank. And if the way that they're intercepting that traffic or the kind of stuff that you're doing on there is being transferred in a certain way, they also have the capabilities to like see that you typed in this username. They might not be able to get the password, but they can get the username. And then from there, that makes it 10 times easier for them to crack through something like that. Things like VPNs help with that. And it's not a never use a public Wi-Fi. It's the scariest thing in the world. It's something to be mindful of. If I'm on the public Wi-Fi, maybe I won't access this client's important data if I'm not using my VPN. So again, just something to be mindful of.
All right, so device security there. Big takeaway for me, Angel, is just being conscious. If you're out and about, being conscious of being on public Wi-Fi or walking away from your computer itself or your phone for a minute or two and making sure that that stuff's just locked up quickly.
Yeah, and just quick notes. If you know your auto lock timing is 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever, you're like, it's going to be a little long and I need to walk away for an extended period of time, lock your screen, lock your phone, lock your computer, whatever it might be. On a computer, it's the Windows key and L and it'll lock the screen for you automatically. On your phones, a lot of times we just press the power buttons and it locks the screen so that we have to put in the PIN or the biometrics afterwards. So it's just a good habit to get used to.
All right, so Angel, we're getting close here. Take us into key takeaways, please, and I'll just summarize for a second before you take us through the takeaways. But we started at the beginning talking a bit about, I think, 95% of breaches or issues having some kind of human factor or human error element to it. So we know that exists. We're people. And then we talked about passwords, spotting suspicious communication from email to phone calls to even text we got into, secure, better, good browsing habits. And then finally, we just wrapped up talking about device security. So, what are our key takeaways?
So what I wanted to do with the key takeaways was to kind of just highlight some things that we as humans can do moving forward, both ongoing this month and even this week. So we'll start with ongoing habits. Those would be things like thinking before you click. So again, going back to emails or links or anything like that, just really looking at what I'm clicking on, why I'm clicking on it, and the way it looks. Reporting suspicious activity. If you get that weird email that says, "Oh my God, you need to, send this ACH to this company right now because we forgot to pay our bill." Um, there's somebody you can contact to basically reach out and be like, is this legitimate? And staying informed on threats. Just in this, session, we talked about some new stuff that's maybe not as common, but it's still becoming more common. And understanding these things and understanding that they're rising and that this stuff is happening and that they're trying to find out new ways to do it every day. It's always very helpful. Some things you can do this month. Checking your device security, screen lockout times, making sure you have biometrics or a PIN set up on your phone, making sure you have updates set up, stuff like that. Reviewing privacy settings, so those would be like app permissions and stuff like that. And then backing up any important data you may have. We because we're humans, there's always that chance we're still going to fall for something. And if we have backups of our important stuff, at least we know I can nuke this situation and move on with life without losing everything. And then things that you can do this week, enabling MFA everywhere you can. If you have an account, whatever it might be, if it offers MFA, I would strongly suggest setting it up. Again, I know it's annoying, but it's one of the biggest things we can do to protect, any accounts that we might have. Considering a password manager, that one's, obviously takes a little bit more time. It's not that easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to start using a password manager and everything's going to be in there. It does take some time to move everything over to it, but it's something to look into. There's a lot of free options if, you're going to be using it for personal use. And then for businesses, there's a lot of business-based ones where the accounts can be managed and stuff like that. So it's very helpful tools. And then updating critical software. If your computer is telling you it needs to do updates and it's been telling you that for 2 weeks now, take the 10 minutes after this, go ahead and restart your computer. Make sure you save anything that you need to save beforehand.
All right, Angel, those are some great takeaways. So, ongoing this month, this week. Remember, everybody, you can download a copy of the PDF if you want to check these things for reference later on, if you're able to um, take on some of these things to help out. So, Angel, I'm going to go ahead and put our last question up, if that's good with everybody. And then, Angel, I do see a question in the chat. Do you see the chat on your side, or do you want me to read it to you?
I got it.
Okay.
Who do we report fraud to after it's happened? So that's a good question. Depending on your organization, there's going to be a chain that any kind of fraud needs to be reported to, in a certain way. So I would definitely start with like your manager or the closest person to you when it comes to the organizational chart. and then from there it goes up. Every organization is different depending on your company and depending on what kind of data you have access to. So it's not a clear answer, and it really is dependent on the organization itself. First step is always whoever's above you, though.
All right, the last question is up. Fourth and final question. What's your go-to reaction when you see a suspicious email? Delete it faster than a speeding bullet, forward it to IT like a responsible hero, click it just to see what happens, and then call your coworker to gossip about it. And I'll leave the poll up for another 10 seconds. I can see the top two responses coming in, Angel, and both of these kind of jumped out at me. So I can see where people's heads are. Okay, I'm going to close the poll up in 5 seconds, everybody. 5 more seconds, we'll close it up and we'll. All right, here we go. Let me end it and put the results up. So it looks like we've got about 58% said delete it faster than a speeding bullet, and then the balance, the other 42% said forward it to IT like a responsible hero. What do you think, Angel?
So it is common for, the first line of action to be, I'm just going to get rid of this. Um, Totally okay. The main reason why forwarding it to your IT support is the right answer, for lack of a better term, is because if there is an attack happening, let's say at your company, there's 50 employees, you delete that email, well, there are 49 other people that probably got the same email. And if we're not spreading that information, not the email itself, you don't want to forward it to 49 people, but forwarding it to your, whoever your IT support specialist is, and for them to determine, hey, this is malicious, then what they can do is actually block it on their side, and then maybe send out some kind of correspondence to everyone else in the company that says, hey, you know, Ben got a fraudulent email. It looks like somebody has spoofed, CEO number one's email account. Please ignore any emails that say this or that look like they're coming from there, or report it to us. That way we can handle it from our side. It stops the spread, basically, and that's what we're looking for.
All right, I'm going to close that one down. Looks like another chat message or related chat message, Angel. Just take a quick glance at there, but
Fraudulent banking. So the follow-up was, it was fraudulent banking info given to me from a client to change on an employee. The client was hacked, so what responsibility do we have to our clients when it's their fault? It was fraudulent banking info given to me from a client. I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around the question, but happy to answer it off this, if anything else.
yeah, we'll reach out to her just immediately after this by email and get a little bit more information. It's sometimes hard to get through the chat exactly what the situation is. So yeah, we'll reach out. No problem. So
Oh, I get the question though.
got it? Okay.
Long story short, it sounds like client was hacked, then info was sent to basically us and said, hey, you need to change this in my system, but then that's sending it to a different bank account so that, this goes back to that business email compromise thing that we were talking about earlier. That's an important, high level email that was probably compromised. Everything looks legitimate about it, but it turns out that it was fraudulent by nature. Um, those things are hard. Those situations are hard. Making sure that you have the proper logging in place, that it, that the steps on your side of the business were handled correctly, and that there weren't any missteps from either you or your employees during that process. So it was 100% from a legitimate client. It was 100% from a legitimate sender, and you guys know that those things were verified. You have certain protections in place on your side, from a security standpoint, to scan for phishing or spoofing or anything like that. So long story short, you had all the stuff in place to say, we know that we had the walls up and everything about this was legitimate, but from the client side, they were hacked and there's nothing you can do about that. Um, you don't really have any kind of like responsibility, when it comes to, like, you should have, or anything like that. as long as you followed the right process. So for something like this, like changing the bank account, if the normal process is like, well, if we get that kind of request and it's coming through email, we need to verify that physically with another person through a phone call or something like that to make sure that this is a legitimate request. Those are the kind of things. That's the responsibility that you would have. But beyond that, there's honestly not much you can do.
All right, we've got one more question, but I want to just let everybody know when we'll hang out. Angel, don't go anywhere. We've got one other question here, but for those folks that do need to run, um, thank you so much for being with us. And Angel, thank you so much for taking us through things. Our session is over. Oh, hold on one sec. Let me do what we did our last poll. So we got our last poll. I was worried I missed it. So session's over, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. We're going to do one more question here, but you can hang up if you've got places to go. You will see the survey pop up on the screen. So thanks, everybody. Angel, question through the Q&A, and the person's just asking: is there somewhere outside of the company where you might report, let's say malicious activity or a security threat or suspicious activity? Is there somewhere outside of your organization where you might report something like that?
So yeah, there are there are agencies that are specifically set up to like just to report on like phishing scams or um, large scale scams. Like obviously they don't want you sending them every, bad text message you get. But there are agencies that are set up to like receive that kind of information. I can definitely, I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Because I don't go to it that often, to be perfectly honest. But I can definitely get that information spread out. But there are. And on top of that, depending on your industry, there are also pathways and agencies that you have to report to if something does happen. Not necessarily if you got a scam email, but if you fell victim to something. There are specialized agencies that in that reporting structure, you go to your management and it goes to the people in your company, but then there's somebody in your company that's supposed to report to let's say the IRS to say, hey, we were compromised. There was 100 records that were leaked out before we could lock it down. It impacts this many people and this dollar amount. That way they have that information and you're doing your due diligence to make sure that the stuff was, even if it was minor, that again, you're following the right steps.
Yeah, if we have more specifics on the Angel, when I post inside the platform a recording of this session, we can post any additional information there along with that inside the platform if we have it, so we can follow up there if we're able to. Cool.
Yeah, no, I'll get the specifics. I have a list floating around somewhere. I just got to find it. It's in one of my 600 tabs.
All right, yeah, just I hope you didn't close that tab. So, all right, well, hey everybody, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Angel, thank you very much for spending some time with us and sharing information. We're officially all set for the day, everyone. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. So, bye everybody.